Welcome to Hearties, our chat with our cast and crew for When Calls the Heart. I'm Dawn Bateman from North Carolina, and I'm happy to have some friends with me.
I'm Jennifer from Seattle, Washington.
And I'm Marg from San Diego, California.
And we are fortunate to again be joined with our most seasoned member of our writing staff, Derek Thompson. Welcome back, Derek.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you all.
Yes. So you wrote the last episode, which was 8. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what aspect of was like for you, like your signature? Like you've been, there's a lot of episodes that you were always, credited about, oh, that's a Derek Thompson script. What in this particular time that you believe that this particular episode was simply Derek Thompson?
I don't know if I have any signature stuff. I mean, I know what I like to write and I know what tends to work. And what I liked about this episode is that, some of the writers bug me that I do a little too much of less is more. I like to be pretty frugal with my words and let the actors kind of bring it out and let the audience work a bit harder. And sometimes that doesn't always work on Hallmark. They want more explanation and more dialogue and everything. But in this one, there's a bunch of different scenes and different storylines where they can just sit and they can just, not very much is said, whether it's Gowan and Bill or Elizabeth at the grave. Of course, not much is said there on the other side, but you're allowed Rosaleen and Gowan and certainly Elizabeth and Nathan. They're just allowed to sit there and say very little, but the audience is working with them and like trying to figure stuff out and fill in the gaps. And I personally think that works really well. And I have a lot of fun writing that stuff. And I think they just nailed each of those scenes this week. So those scenes make me really happy. Like I just love seeing the actors do their thing and the directors and see what they do with it. So if anything, my my stamp is less is more usually on those scenes. Like that's how I like to write. And so this is honestly the way this episode turned out. It is one of my favorites. It's just the way it worked. I liked a lot about it. So
yeah, that's right. Well, you mentioned Bill, so we'll talk about Bill right now. I mean, he's heartbroken. He's in his booth with like all of the coffee with Madeleine St. John, and then all of a sudden Henry just, I don't know, to me he was still in the restaurant or whatever and just sat down with Bill. But that whole scene, can you talk about the those vulnerable conversations with guys that we've not had? I mean, we've got a lot of women on our ensemble cast, but that was kind of a different feel. So can you talk about that particular scene?
Yeah, I mean, that scene took a lot of work. When I originally wrote it, it was, contrary to what I just said, I wrote a bit more, and I sort of knew that I'd written too much because Gowan's he's a man of few words. Bill is right to the point. And I think that's what's great about them is there's sort of no nonsense and all business. And so when they finally do, in the moments where they do open up, whether it's, Gowan having his crisis of faith and everything else, or Bill having his health scare or whatever it is, it means a lot because when you don't see them open up very often. So in this case, it got pulled back, and part of that is to the credit of the actors. They sort of flagged with me and others, I think we could say last year, I say, yeah, I think you're right. As soon as you look at it, you realize like you two could carry this. And so it's kind of funny how Gowan just strolls over. And
Bill
he just
was,
lets Bill go.
Yeah, Bill says, just one for my coffee, things like that. It was just like heartbroken. So heartbroken.
Yeah. He doesn't want to say it, but he is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Interesting.
Yeah. interesting that the actors themselves would say, we'd like to say less. You would think they would want more lines, but if they know they have to, that they can work it without words, that's amazing.
I
Yeah.
think they recognize that particular situation with those two. Definitely less would be said. And Gowan, I love, I love Martin, who plays Gowan, in that he can do so little on the surface, but he's doing a lot. He's just there, like, I'm just sitting across from you. No, I'm not asking you for anything, but he just has a way of drawing it out. Such a good actor. And so as Bill, like Jack Wagner called me and just said, "Nah, I think we can cut this down a little bit and just make it really tight." And I said, "Yeah, you got it. Go for it. This is awesome." And they killed it. So great.
Wow. Interesting.
All right, so switching gears a little bit, Bernhart Montague as the mysterious fiance. How did you come up with his name?
I mean, I think it came from Beth Stewart, because he emerged in her episode, and I know she came up with the first name. I don't know where Montague came from. I know that I misspelled it all the time in scripts because I know someone that dropped the E on Montague. So that's all I remember of it. But we all agreed it just had a snappy ring to it, and it would be a good name for that type of character who's just kind of flashy and mysterious and kind of got that villain type smile to him. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Emily Hansen Root of Las Vegas guessed last week that Madeleine may not want to be in the relationship with Mr. Montague, and his weird, kind of distant responses to Elizabeth's questions kind of point in that direction too. What is Montague hiding?
Well, I can't give anything away, but I think what we're trying to set up is, we love our smug villains on this show, and we've had several good ones. And so we wanted to set up somebody. He could be okay. He could be a snake in the grass. He could, and we're slowly peeling back the layers. So, and he's got, a built-in henchman, and so he could be a really bad guy, or it could all be a misunderstanding. So that's what we're trying to play, and using it as a mechanism to show how Lucas and Elizabeth look at things so differently. And I think it worked. I think he's a great character. I think he's fun to not like, and in some ways fun to like.
He's playing the villain well.
Yeah.
Like
the henchman was Henry and Spurlock,
Right. It's just the creation of this show. We've had ever since then. We've had that type,
right?
And they come and go, the railroad and whatever else. So maybe he'll be the next. Yeah.
Rosemary is determined to get to get the governor to visit. She, that seat at the Mercantile was a tongue twister. Bixie Balford from Buxton, and Buxton is always bragging about their brass band. I mean, honestly, you really gave Pascal like a run for her money. She had to do those like vocal exercises or something. But so tell us, are bees just like inherently funny? Because just the was so funny.
I think they just have a little pop to them, or peas, or anything that just kind of pops off the tongue. And Pascal's just too good. We had to give her something to trip her up, and she didn't do it. We were hoping she'd have trouble, but of course she nails it. But yeah, it was something that sort of evolved over time. I think in one of my first drafts, I didn't realize how it would sound, and then that's what we've got here. And then I think our showrunner added to it and just made it pop a little bit more, and I've heard that Pascal had fun with it, so I'm glad it worked out.
The start, because then it was brilliant and broadcast. I mean, it went on.
Yeah.
It started watching for them or listening for them, and oh my gosh, when she was going off with her grand plans, and then poor Flo was like, "What about doves?" Right away.
That's funny.
So good, yeah.
Really, it was fantastic. So that brings us to the choir, which was, of course, we've been begging for a musical for I don't know how long. So I feel like we got a little musical, and it just offered you so many storylines. I was really interested in the little interplay between Minnie and Rosemary, how, Rosemary's perfectionism and Minnie's open-heartedness were definitely at odds here. So a Hearty asked, you do need to tell us about that, but also Heather Hood of Minneapolis wonders how you chose the 3 songs, which were Will the Circle Be Unbroken, Oh Happy Day, and All Through the Night.
That was a big collaboration of everyone trying to find a song that was cleared and okay to use by our lawyers and everything, something that meant or sort of resonated with people no matter where they come from or what their background is or whatever. Just the words make sense. There's also the rhythm of the scene, you need it to kind of fit in with what was going on. And so as for instance, Gowan's sitting down next to Rosaleen, the right things are being said, or at least the song, the melody kind of works with it. So there was a lot of back and forth with our music people and our showrunner, and we were compiling lists of, we had lists of hundreds of songs. It was crazy.
At age, wow.
Yeah, and we wanted to kind of make it for everybody, no matter if you'd heard it or not or whatever. It worked for you and brought feelings that we needed in those scenes out of it. So it was a longer process, but I think it really came together. It's and just to see the choir kind of get better and better as they go. Yeah.
Too, when she's singing to Goldie, that was just beautiful and important, I think, to the Hearties to have that choir. I hope it's not the last of it. I hope we get more.
I'm allowed to say, I think, I can say that there's going to be more. Yeah.
Oh, tell us about the little dynamic between Minnie and Rosemary. That was really interesting.
I love any scene where Rosemary just gets going and kind of forgets herself and someone has to roll, and Minnie's such the perfect person for that. And Minnie's done this before. She's led a choir, and of course, being the pastor's wife, she'd be all about inclusion. So I just like those moments when Rosemary's just gung-ho and this is how it's going to be, and then someone pulls her back to reality and she kind of has to correct a little bit. And of course she's right, and she's all for that. But we wanted to play within the choir scene, the first one, just her frustration that, okay, it's not going well, and this inclusion is creating, she's a performer. She wants it to be perfect. Yeah. But over the course of the episode, you get to see that, including everybody, that it makes it more special. Everybody's involved, and the outcome is great. So Minnie felt like the perfect person to sort of show her the way in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, classic. As a minister's daughter, I can tell you that's like classic minister's wife having to like rise above. Yeah. Rosemary was so undermining her during that choir practice. That could have caused some feelings, but she just rose above it all. So Rosemary's little looks at everybody.
Rolling her eyes. Yeah, we have a lot more fun coming down the line with that group, so it should be good. Yeah.
There was some discordant singing in the beginning, so
and then all of it was just beautiful at the end of in the performance. Yeah, that's great.
I've been told actors really enjoy pretending they can't sing and doing a scene where they know they can sing, but they have to pretend they can't sing. They're all
fun.
Actors are amazing. They just know how to do all these different things. And most of them are great singers.
Are those Mike and Amanda's voices?
I believe so. Yeah.
Sounded like it. I don't know.
So
yeah, I think she's a good singer too. I
surprised.
They're all so mega talented.
See more of that.
Yeah, definitely. So Hearties love faith moments in our show. So this season has been, hearkening to, I think, season 1. So we've had some scriptures quoted, hymns sung, prayers said, pastoral guidance provided. So tell us about how you can write faith for a secular audience. I would think that that would be an interesting
Yeah,
challenge.
it's kind of like the music that we just talked about, where you want it to be relatable to people that don't know the scripture. And we certainly have people that we lean on to help us with that. And so you have to find something that everyone can understand and appreciate, and it resonates with them, no matter what their walk of life is. And but it also works in the scene. You know, the meaning is always what's most important, but then there is sort of the rhythm of the scene, and how long can we keep these two together. And we want it to be, we don't want it to drag on too long. We want it to hit its mark really, really well. So definitely consultation, and then we get some options, and then we kind of just find something that feels right. And then we, you know, usually check on that to make sure that people that know, you know, believe that it's appropriate. And then for other people that maybe aren't as religious and don't understand the scripture, does it work for them? Does it make them feel something? You know, that's what's great about scripture. It always, no matter where you come from, it has meaning if you want to look for it. So that's usually the process. And there's always pretty good debate about what the right, because there's always another one, you know, there's always another little piece of scripture that's better or worse or different, you know, and it's hard to make that decision. And those scenes are always inherently powerful. So you'd hate to make the wrong choice, because just the situation is somebody is trusting someone else to give them this guidance, this moment, and you don't want it to be halfway. You want it to be the right one. So yeah, it's highly scrutinized for good reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, it feels like that you've really kind of had a moment to kind of talk about it and things like that. So yeah, because people don't want to be thwarted in your brain going, you know, another faith point for us. But but we love it. That's good.
That's good.
So Mike Polito, and I'm hoping, Mike, that is your last name, from Dallas, Texas. So hi for Dallas, because I just moved from there. Said, quote, "The theme of forgiveness was so well portrayed with Rosaleen and Henry last night." So tell me about the conversation that I know, Beth, we talked about to her last week, was it was not really a debate to have Mimi with for that scene. So just for the genesis of that idea that Rosaleen would be the catalyst for Henry, can you talk about what the writers were talking about when you conceived that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I've wanted to bring her back for a long time, and I've pitched it before several times. And I think what we ran into is a couple of things. We wanted her to be in the right place to get to this moment, because this is the moment you wanted. You didn't want to not resolve any feeling she had towards Gowan at that point. So you wanted her to be old enough, to be mature enough to be able to get there, and you wanted Gowan to be in a place where it was appropriate that he receives this too. And I think after what all that Gowan has been through in the previous seasons, in the recent seasons, he's in a really good place. And for lack of a better term, he deserves this. You know, he sort of has earned this. He's done the right things. He's a new person now. And so to bring her back as an adult, pretty much in this world, and still holding on to that childhood pain.
Yeah,
which I think is great about those scenes, is that you can just see that that's old pain. Like, she really brought that. And the question around, like, what will she be able to get there? Will she be able to forgive? And so it's been a long time. It's been up, as I say, like on the board for a long time, and it's never felt quite right. But what I what I was drawn to it is that with Rosaleen, we have a interesting, unique opportunity where we haven't seen her for a long time. Other kids in town have seen Gowan's transformation. You're able to bring her back fresh. All she remembers really is that man that did, in her eyes, evil things. And so she gets to make that full transformation. I think that really worked. And I think the actress did a great job, and so did.
Oh yeah, Mamie was fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
we've not seen her for 8 years, so that was, you never know. And then when she just nailed it, especially with the Henry, I think it was in the barn. We'll talk about that later, but that just was so impactful. You could not feel it as we were watching.
Yeah, they just did it as good as I could imagine someone doing. And those moments are one. There's lots of moments like that where you look forward. It's going to happen eventually on the show, and you're just waiting for the right time to make it land. And so when they do get to happen, and I love stuff that's called back to first season.
Right.
Our fans tend to respond to that really well. And we never wanted to lose Rosaleen in the first place. It was just the complications of making TV shows. But it's kind of a really interesting way to come back, and hopefully we see her again.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, they did. I mean, both her and Henry just killed that dialogue that they had in the barn. And what she said, I can't accept what he did to our family. He took our dad from us and cast the women and children aside like they were nothing. It just, you couldn't not feel anything, because like you had said, she hadn't seen the transformation that he had gone through like the other kids had. And so what was it like for you to kind of just bring that whole season, just from season 1 to now, bring it all together like that?
When I was writing, especially that bit, I kind of thought to myself, this is never going to make air. It's almost too heavy for this show. But I believed in it. I believe like that's how somebody might react, and you gotta let it all out before you can heal and forgive and go through all the process. And
absolutely,
with her being away, she was able to hold it and hold it and hold it, and it gets worse and it festers, and then there he is. What do you say to that guy that you feel took your dad away and everything else? And heartbreaking scene. It's one of those, I mean, I know something's working when I'm typing it, and it's just like you can feel like, you feel for the person, even though you're just making it up as you go. Like you just feel for anyone that would have to go through that and then face the person and deal with that awkwardness and everything else. And because I think Rosaleen just didn't want to face it anymore and had just blocked that off in her life. And so then we get to the interesting scene with her mom later, where she gives her the wisdom, and she goes with it. So yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out.
It was beautiful. I'm so glad it didn't land on the cutting floor. I mean, it was a key moment of that episode, at least in my mind. It was beautiful.
It was so relatable too. I think all of us who have gone away from our hometowns and come back, it doesn't have to be a trauma, but I just felt that in that moment of things have changed in your absence, and you have to get your head around that in your heart. And I think it's just such an interesting hallmark of a show going on this long, that you could watch Mamie grow up and then bring her back at a time when that developmentally was right on. I mean, and it was very searing dialogue. I'm so glad that they let you keep it. So amazing.
So there were 2 monologues last night that were just beautiful. One was Elizabeth talking at the grave, and one with Rosaleen and Henry in the stable. What can you kind of tell us about writing an effective monologue like that? Like what goes through your head?
The Elizabeth grave scene, another thing that was sort of on the board for a while, and when's the right time to do this and do it right, and have that kind of conversation. And the cool thing about that scene, and that's, you know, good acting helps us with this, is that you kind of picture Jack on the other side talking with her. You know, like your head sort of goes there, just like, oh yeah, there he is. They're just, and it's clear that they talk here and there, and it's fine, but they're having a conversation, and she's kind of filling him in, and there's just something powerful about that. He's gone on Earth, but he's there, and she can bounce these things off him. He's still dad, and all these other things. So that's fun to write, heartbreaking at times, because as soon as you start talking about little Jack, it just, you know, that's where you re-experience the loss. But I think when you have a character talking on their own, you need some pace to it. You need to, the substance of the words needs to start building, you know, and there has to be some sort of resolution at the end. So, you know, with Gowan and Rosaleen, it's she just took that over. He said yes a couple times, and not much more than that. And she was building up the courage, and it just started coming, and the floodgates opened, and then she just got it going, and she had listened to her mom, and her mom was right. It felt good. And so, yeah, I think, you know, just keeping the pace, building to something, to some resolution. It doesn't always have to be great, but in those two cases, I think it was like very sweet. I love that scene in the stables. I love the way everything about it. I love it. I was so happy.
Lori Bollinger Noble of Massachusetts wrote last night, I think the writers are probing very real, difficult complexities of life. Elizabeth is a widow. Moving on isn't flicking a switch. Grief comes in waves. If Lucas and Elizabeth are together in the end, they will be stronger for having gone through this. I appreciate the writing for exploring life's complexities. Talk to us about how grief is rearing its head here.
I think the key is that we have to appreciate what Elizabeth has been through, and there's no formula to how you navigate life after what she's been through. And, you know, with that scene at the grave, you could say, oh, she's over it, and she's accepted it, and he's still in her heart and everything else. But it's not like that. It's complicated. And I think the key, and Lori makes a good point. It is, there are complexities to it. I think you have to look at them. You have to try to let the audience feel it too. We have to just give her room to do what she's going to do. And when we were trying to figure out what to do with Elizabeth this year, I think, you know, having, you know, knowing people and experiencing loss ourselves, we just like, let's not make it such a straight line. Let's just explore how she gets there, and there are no wrong answers. And of course the fans will read into everything that happens with her, but that's sort of the interesting thing. She's an interesting character. The fans are going to be curious about what's happening with this interesting character. And so yeah, without giving anything away, like that's what the journey that we're on with her, I think.
Yeah, we had that comment last week where Elizabeth said she was also, or she knew what Joseph meant when he said that he was at a crossroads, and it didn't really register necessarily last week, but this week I think we really saw she is very much at a crossroads. You know, and it's, you know, one of the things that we try to encourage Hearties to do is to see all the layers that the writers are adding here. So it's not just, you know, her friendship with Nathan, her engagement to Lucas. It's also, you know, her grief, her being a mother, her, you know, the other aspects that are coming into this and playing upon this moment. So that's really, I did get that she was really at a crossroads. Is that, you know, I assume you're going to continue to play that out.
Yes, yeah. And to your point there, the little Jack will come first in her life. This isn't the first time she's been engaged. This is post some very traumatic years and tough times, and she's trying to move forward. But in the back of her mind, it's always going to be the boy and doing that right. And again, that just adds to complication. I mean, I have little kids that age, and I know what if I were to all of a sudden be alone, it'd be tricky. It would take a while, and my focus all of a sudden is just laser on them, and how to help them all through. So it's easy to sit back and say, well, why isn't she doing this, and why isn't she doing this, and why aren't they doing this? And I think we just have to let it breathe, and let them kind of take us where they want to go. And I think it's good, we're sitting here mid-season-ish, and there's questions. So I think as writers, we feel like we've succeeded if mid-season there are questions about everything, about everyone, and what their plan is and where they'll land. And so I hope we're in the right place at this point.
Yeah, I think sometimes Hearties and all audiences who enjoy Hallmark and escapism, we have a hard time waiting for, we don't like to sit with questions necessarily, but
sure
are very interesting and compelling writing. But I was thinking about you as a dad last night. Did the incident with Jack hiding under the sofa, did that come from anybody's real life? That, wow, Jada played a panicked babysitter very well.
I did that to a babysitter, and that's why I put it in there. And then they said, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, but I was told we can't do it because the couch is too close to the ground. And I said, well, we should get longer legs on that couch, because I think it's a fun, because we were like, where else would he hide? And it's like, the whole point of it is that he's right in front of your face the whole time. And yeah, I had done that to a neighbor babysitter when I was young, and so we find it very funny. But
so did they add some length to I think that couch legs, those needed some length anyway.
I don't know if they lengthened it or if they just did a trick where he lifted it, and then there he is under the lifted couch,
But he lifted the couch, so it's not like he crawled out of there. So
no, and then his laugh at the end is so good. Jack's laugh.
His little devilish look when she's counting and he turns the corner. It was darling.
Yeah. My sister saw that and she said, "Oh yeah, you wrote that."
Here's a signature one for you.
Yeah. Signature.
Yeah.
Right.
That's funny. So the episode last night was directed by Elise. Is it Leet?
I think it's Leet. Yes.
Yeah. So, but she's relatively new to Wind Calls a Heart. So I know that she did some directing with Chesapeake Shores, things like that. So talk about the graveside scene. Was it the director's choice to kind of follow her and her skirt going to the graveside? Because it still, harkens about when Jack was, when going to the engagement, so the camera followed her skirt. So is that something that you wrote, or is it something that the director
chose? No, that was her, and it worked really well. And for those that knew the show well enough to go back to that moment where we also did that, it worked really well for that. But even if you didn't remember that, I think just this sort of build up, like where are we, what's happening, okay, okay. And I just loved the way this episode looked. Elise is great to work with, and just brought a kind of a fresh little look to the scenes. There were a few scenes where the characters are deep in the background, and there's some really interesting business out front, and some new angles where it just felt like the town all of a sudden swelled a little bit. And so she's wonderful, and she's back, so she'll be with us again.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, that's the same thing with Henry and Rosaleen. So was in the stable, And the lighting was really the
Incredible.
ultimate of what it was, because the dark and the light that was in Henry's face, things like that. So
Yeah.
did you wrote that it was going to be in the stable, or was that another director's choice?
I wrote that he was doing stuff with horses near the stable, but I think she decided to move it further in and have those
Gotcha.
lines of light coming through. And there's so many ways you can take that. I when I watched it recently, I thought, oh, this is Rosaleen seeing him in a new light. Like she's just kind of all of a sudden this light going across his face. And or as you mentioned, it can be the dark and the light competing, and inside Gowan, and the light is winning, like the light is taking over. Again, just another example of just something that just popped. It could have been outside, it could have been in broad daylight, and I think just him being sort of back in the shadows and her
what a great choice, though. I mean,
yeah, it really was good.
That is his journey, and he was in the dark, season 1, season 2. I mean, he was really in the dark, and now we are seeing him in a way that we really didn't even think that he could be.
Well, you see him laughing in that episode when he's asked to join the choir. I mean, I haven't seen him laugh like that, I don't think, on the show.
That struck me. I had never seen him laugh. You've seen him do a few, kind of little, not evil chuckles, but kind of, but this one was just like, he truly laughing. It was great.
That actor's good. And they're all great.
Definitely.
But he has this way of really dissecting where his character is, and he'll throw something at you. What about this? This is what he's going through. And you're just like, wow, I hadn't thought about it nearly that deeply. He comes up with some really interesting stuff. But when I heard that laugh is him. Like that's who the actor is. And it was interesting. So story-wise, you kind of think, oh, there's innocent Gowan inside there. That's like the child that was Gowan at one point, just giddy and laughing again. So it was unexpected, not really scripted. It wasn't scripted saying, oh, like Gowan laughs for the first time. It was just something they did, and it really worked. It was good.
Well, impactful.
Really love in that stable scene how the doors are thrown open behind Rosaleen, because it's her journey too, and you can see that her path is back to the light too.
And really, the doors are open for him. Come on over if you want to join, and then will he join? And then he does.
It was get out of the park, you guys.
Creative conscience of a director and what decisions they do, and that you guys are artists. I mean, that is something that you really see, and I'm hoping that people that are enjoying the show just looking at it versus this was just a really beautiful episode, just for scenery.
Oh, absolutely. And they're telling a story visually. We work with our words and everything else, and the storylines and the dialogue, but they can do stuff sometimes that just creates questions, discussion, whatever, like us right now. What are the open doors of the stables mean? The light, everything else. It just adds layers to it. And so I don't think that way necessarily. So to pair up with directors that can do that, and cinematographers and the lighting people and everything, it's just incredible.
It's a village.
John Ada, layering in the music, the trumpets during the grave scene was also just gorgeous. So it's all those participants contributing to it's really beautiful.
I think John liked this episode. There was a lot for him to chew on.
Going back to more of the mysterious stuff, Karen from Rochester, New York says, everyone's kind of getting the puzzle pieces. Lee gets that the engineering of the trestle bridge is odd. Rosie's seeing that it's located away from the road. Jed's noticing all the construction. Bill knows things aren't adding up. Karen thinks that the D may be the operative letter here. Are they damming and diverting the water? Like what's happening?
I have to plead the fifth. I think I can't check too much. I mean,
That's a direct kind of question.
We need him twirling that mustache. What's he up to? Is he the bad guy? Is he up to something? I mean, I think it's clear that something's going on, and will they find out about it in
Is
time?
this a watch and see kind of moment?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm glad that we're getting questions about it. So that means people are intrigued and interested. Yes.
Yeah. All right, so I got more questions. Hopefully we can dive a little bit more into this one. Tanya from Briar, Washington has observed there's a noticeable decline in romance between Elizabeth and Lucas this season, and she's wondering if season 9 was maybe a little more passionate than Hallmark generally gets. She's feeling like it might be a little lukewarm this season. Was there an effort to kind of rein things in, or what's happening there?
I think there's so much going on that they're also getting pulled into other stories, and now there's bad guys in town, but so there's kind of swept up in other things, and there's the pressure of their next steps in life and everything. And it goes back to what we were talking about, that there's no right way to do this for Elizabeth. And if not to say that she's taking it slow, but she's just got other things going on, and relationship stuff sometimes kind of takes a backseat for a little bit, and then you jump back and you focus on that. But not an effort to tone it down or anything like that. But I think we just wanted to really create rounded out stories that I think the show works best when you have a bunch of interesting stories that all the characters sort of flow in and out of and are tied to. So it just feels really connected, rather than, these three are over here and these two are doing this, and these, we're trying to do more of that as best we can. So it may feel like sometimes she's pulled in other directions and not strictly in the romance. I mean, I know there were comments about, we want them to be doing more than just romance. We want them to have their own things in their own lives and their friendships and their careers and everything else. So I hope it ends up in a position where everyone is supportive of Elizabeth and happy for her and excited about the future. They just got to keep watching for that.
Yeah, I mean, they did go back to the bridge, the kissing bridge, as some call it, and I felt like for couples that's a very grounding thing. I think and even Lucas sort of mentioned, well, that's how you saw me when I first arrived. And I think whenever you can kind of revive those memories, I mean, that felt very romantic to me, the way she put her hands in his, and they were, so we'll see.
The honeymoon doesn't last forever, and you have to make efforts to try to keep things going and find those special moments. So I hope we've got some of those. And again, she's finding her way. We all do it differently, and I think the resolution is the right way, and hopefully the fans are happy too. But right now, again, we're mid-season. We're trying to create questions. What's happening with everybody? So I don't want it to be in a straight line. It just kind of we're turning down the river. Yeah.
It's not a straight line at all. No.
Yeah.
Talk about this little difference in style that Elizabeth and Lucas seem to have around Montague. Elizabeth's really like, people say she hasn't always been this meddling. I saw on last night on some comments, people saying she hasn't always been this like meddling. I was like, do you remember her going after Gabe in the shed, in season 1, like, when he had the paw sign that they discovered, I mean, she's always liked to investigate these things. She is her own, she's definitely always had that tendency, but what was it, that moment where Lucas is saying he likes to have, keep his enemies close, and tell us about that little dynamic there. It was interesting. Why is that important?
He's a businessman and gambler and a former gambler, I guess. And I think life is very strategic to him. Whereas with Elizabeth, she's a truth teller, and she teaches her kids to always land on the truth. Like, let's start with the truth and everything else will come. And what is it? Bad things happen when good people do nothing, and everything out like that. Those are her lessons. And so she's always going to fight if something seems off. I mean, she doesn't play the game. She just wants to know. And whereas he maybe has just learned in his life, see where it goes, be patient, and everything else. So it makes them an interesting couple because they do approach things so differently. And I think they probably learn from each other a bit that way, where he can teach her some patience, but she can teach him to do the right thing more often than not. And so I think that's where it comes from. She's just an inherently honest, truthful person that wants everyone to do right. And when she sees something that doesn't add up, or she gets a bad feeling, she's going to get to the bottom of it. Whereas Lucas sort of patiently waits, let them make the first wrong move, and then I'll decide.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm wondering how all that's going to play out. But, Beth, I think, shared with us that he's now using some of his card trick kind of mentality in Hope Valley way. So is that kind of what he's doing here?
Well, we always think he's doing that because that's what he's set up to be, this sort of biding his time, let them make the mistake, and then I'll swoop in. And so you always think the wheels are turning with him. And is he way ahead of everybody?
Okay.
That's the interesting part of Lucas. Is he way ahead? Does he know things that we don't know? Is he just waiting patiently? Is he already solving this problem before we even know it's a problem? He's an interesting character that way, because I think maybe other characters like Nathan or Bill are just straight at it. If there's a problem, the Mountie in them, we solve it. Whereas Lucas sort of finds the perfect time. And I think probably Gallon was probably like that back in the day too.
A few Hearties I saw this morning were thinking that he's cahoots with Montague, and that was the reason why he was protecting. Is there any reason we should believe that?
I don't think. I mean, I think that's a good thing that everyone's feeling that way. I don't think it's something to worry about, but I think that's sort of what you want with Lucas. You want the audience to think, no, he couldn't be. No, because he's got this past, and but I shouldn't say more than that. But I think that's the right outcome. Everyone should be, oh, Lucas, you're good. Don't worry, you're not gonna go down that road. And I'm not saying he will, but I think that's the right headspace to be in. I'm doing a bad job of saying nothing, aren't I?
And very, very hard. I'm just and this preview was explosive and also along those same lines. I mean, Hearties have been wanting some more Mountie action, and clearly we're going to get some Mountie action, but our Mountie appears to have been kidnapped. So, holy cow. Our hearts we can't take it. And it's obvious. Well, it's not obvious. As I watched the preview again this morning, you see the guns drawn, and then of course you hear gunfire. So then it leads you to believe it's related to the cabin, but I don't know, and then you have this line of Elizabeth saying, like, I can't go through this again. Like, come on now. So, all right. First of all, will the kidnapping resolve in episode 9, or are we in for it?
I don't want to say too much about it, but I'll say the resolution to it is very satisfying. And whenever you get in a situation like that with the Mountie, whether it was Jack back in the day, Nathan now, or Bill, when there's a situation like that, usually you're going to get heroics and nail-biting action and all that good stuff we haven't had for a little bit. And so the way they cut that preview together, that was was cruel almost. That's just
That's
the way
it.
that, I mean, I know the episode, I know everything that happens, but still seeing that cut together, like, oh man, holy, I gotta watch next week. So I would say it's not something to worry about, but it's going to be very exciting, and it's I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it certainly is bringing up, as did this scene in which Nathan comes to Allie's rescue during the babysitting scene. They end up having apple juice. They have this very vulnerable, awkward, comfortable. I mean, it was everything. I thought it had so many layers. But then Elizabeth takes Jack's hat, which presumably little Jack had been wearing, and it just got left in the living room or whatever. So talk to us about the transference, which we know existed before between Elizabeth and what she's projecting on Nathan, or is that still happening?
I think that's probably
We hear that cry out like that in the
the significance of the hat in that scene was sort of transitionary to,
Great.
Jack, I gotta go see him, and she's thinking about a lot, and she's just had a very honest conversation with her friend and neighbor, and Nathan's not someone that offers very much, sort of like Bill and Gowan, so it's given her stuff to think about. And I think as he leaves and she just sees the hat, it's sort of like, yeah, who do I turn to when I just have a lot to think about? And the hat also sort of represents little Jack growing into his dad and everything else. So I think Nathan being there at that time, yeah, it was a reminder of a fear that she had, because that's their story. Their story was that it just didn't work out because that's what she went through. She went through losing a Mountie in duty, and Nathan is a reminder of that, even though he probably shouldn't deserve that, but that's what he is. So then they have this interesting chat, and he's there for her to help Allie and everything else, and they trust each other, and that's okay. And then it just sort of transitions into, I have a lot to say out loud to Jack, so she goes to see him. So I kind of liked the way that worked out. It's again one of those scenes where you're just sitting with people as they're honest about stuff. When he says, I'm just, maybe I am done with love, you just really feel it, like you feel for him in that moment. It's just nothing's working out for him, and
a small town, there's not a lot of options.
Yeah. And in the previous episode, I mean, that was a heartbreaker. I
Yeah.
love the scene with Faith in the previous episode.
Beautiful.
You just felt for both of them, really. So I think Nathan is still tied to it that way, where he is just a reminder of the realities that Elizabeth's going through, and which is why I think it's cool that they can remain friends and close and everything, because a lot of people just wouldn't want to go there.
Yeah.
And he's, in his mind, he's at fault for Jack because he took the mission and everything, even though it's not his fault. It was a random thing. But so the fact that she can still be friends and honest with him and support each other, because they're both sort of in the same situation. They got kids that they have to look after on their own, and they have a lot that they can relate to each other about. But
I'm glad you reminded us of all of that, because I think in that moment when he steps out of the house and he has a sort of a smile on his face, I think we were unsure what that was, but it must be that's part of his journey too, to forgive himself, that he can have a good friendship with Elizabeth. And it doesn't necessarily mean when she picks up the hat, it doesn't necessarily mean she's, it's a transition to the grave seed. So those are helpful insights.
I think when he smiles, it's sort of, part of it is like, I'm glad that she and I can still have that, because she's important to him.
Yes.
He wouldn't have that conversation maybe with anybody else, because they've been through the ringer in a
Right.
few different ways. So
Yeah.
I like that aspect of it, that they can still have that.
Yeah, but clearly something's going to get, her trauma is going to get triggered next week by whatever it is happening. We don't know what's happening, but she
Right.
for this again.
Right. And he's clearly special to her, just like many of her friends are. But to add that extra level of a Mountie being lost in town again,
Okay.
that's probably too much to process in the moment, as we can all understand. Yeah.
Well, I think you were so right. I observed that too, that the writing last night, it didn't call attention to itself. It was just kind of, it was, the scenes that we talked about were, there was searing dialogue, and it was just really simple, but it was just crazy powerful. I don't know. I couldn't get through that last scene without my TV screen being occluded by tears, because it was just, we just thank you for that gift of Henry. I'm going to get verklempt, of Henry walking in and Rosaleen moving over. I mean, that just to sit in the pew, I think we all sat in those pews, and it was just really special. So
great moment. Thank you. And I won't take all the credit. It's just the way it came together. We have a great team, and my fellow writers that keep me in line when I veer off track, and I hope we do the same for them. Yeah, it feels really good when we know the script's working, and then you get a production team that just takes it to another level. It's such a good feeling, because the opposite can happen. You can have one that you think like this is the one, and it just doesn't work out on screen. So it's really great when it works out.
Well, less is more, I think, conveys a lot of trust in your teammates, and so I really cool approach, and at least in this episode for sure, it was very well executed. So we're going to get you back in a couple weeks, because you wrote episode 11. So if you'll indulge us again, we're looking forward to that. And we're looking forward to joining you, those of you who are going to be attending the Hearties family reunion. We're all planning to pack our suitcases and head up to Vancouver. Next Sunday, episode 9 is coming in hot, as you saw from the Cruel preview. And there's not a drop of water in sight to cool us down. So please tune in at 9/8 Central. We're going to tweet with the hashtag Hearties. And of course, follow us on YouTube so that you get the chats right away. You don't want to miss any of them. We're so glad that you joined us for Heart to Hearties. Thank you. Bye-bye.